So last week we started with sequencer, and I the homework was to do skeletal mesh blending when I completely forgot to animate the guy that we augmented in tilt brush. So we have good old Bobby Newport right here that we made last week with his Joker hair and Joker tie. And then I brought in a bunch of animations from a pack. And I just want to show you how to kind of blend between them. So if I double click them, this interface right here is called it's called Persona. It's the way of analyzing skeletal meshes. It has a couple of windows. Like if I want to look at my skeleton, I can see the whole skeleton tree. I can make some new poses here if I wanted to deform it, animate it. Then I can look at just the mesh and the textures. And then here's all the list of animations right here. And then, of course, we've already seen physics, where we can have fun with that. So we're going to deal with this timeline right here today, and some of the animations as well. This is the map that I did last week. This is the VR map. We're not going to do anything with VR, so we're just going to be hitting simulate, so we don't have to worry about all this kind of the where the camera's flying and all that kind of stuff. But we are going to look at the sequencer. So underneath my cinematics is the sequencer that I created for the level, and this exists in the level right there. It's an object that I can grab. And then, as I said, for organization's sake, I often like to put my sequencer underneath a little folder with a numerical value at the top, so I can always find it, because I'm always coming back to the sequencer when I'm doing like VR projects, especially like narratives that aren't interactive. Cool. And so let's just throw the character into the scene. So we have Bobby Newport, drag him in. And he has no animation on him. In fact, by default, it wants to use animation blueprint, where we'd have like a state machine or something, but we're just going to do asset. And then we can look at all the different assets we have. That also might be time consuming, and you don't want to do that, and you know what animation you want to start with, and I can just drag in the animation in instead. And it's already loaded right here. We're going to load up our sequencer, and this is the camera cuts we did that has our camera fly through. We also faded in, faded out, if you guys remember, right? And we could see everything go. We animated that box going up and down, and the camera path. But for right now, we're going to add another animation for this character. I can just drag them into the sequencer, or you can add an actor this way. There they are. And by default, it lets you. It has tracks for either animating its position, or changing its animation. But as I've kind of shown, there's tons of stuff we can actually animate. You kind of just have to kind of look around and see the things you want to do. For instance, visibility. I can toggle it off and on keyframes as well. We're going to add in animations today. So I'm going to add an animation. There's that same list we keep on seeing of all the animations. And I'm going to put it in here. And now we see when we scrub, it's doing that animation just like you would see in any kind of digital content creation tool. It is hopefully looping. Looks like it's looping. That's nice. And then we have a couple of properties we can do, which are, we could say, like for instance, how fast it's going. If we want to go half the speed, if we want to go in reverse, these are all cool things we can do. If we drag out beyond the length, it automatically starts looping it. You can maybe you can't see here, but there's a little cut right there showing you that it continues to play. So I can drag it out for minutes and minutes and minutes, and it'll just be an idle on a timeline. I can also just trim it this way, and so now it's short. And then whatever it is when it ends is where it stays. That can also be done by editing it and trimming it. We can trim it to the left, trim it to the right, or split it up. Cool. Let's add another animation. And this is a variation of idle. And that's not going to be good enough for us to tell the difference. Let's add something that's more dramatically different. Like walking, right? So this is completely different. Walks forward. So when I put it right here, it snaps, and we can go from idle to walking forward, but you see there's a pop there, right? Because there are two different animations. All I have to do is drag it to left, and it automatically crossfades it here on a curve, and I can adjust how that curve looks. So now, from idle to walking. So that gets you going pretty quickly if you have these small, like little animation stems, especially if you're using Mixamo. I know people have done entire music videos from Mixamo animations just by doing this kind of stuff. Now, you'll see there's a little foot slippage, right? You see that? Like, if you really want to do this well, that's what Motion Builder and Maya are for blending animations. Like, you can use the tracks view, and it also does blending. In Motion Builder, you say, I want to blend, and I want it specifically blending on this bone. And everything else should follow and be dictated by, again, a walk cycle, let's say, on the left foot, which is really nice to have. Also, this guy is walking forward. When working with Sequencer, oftentimes, when you know you're going to be animating in Sequencer, when you're in Mixamo, there's an option to tick a box saying in place. It's actually best to use that in place and then use the transform to make it go forward. Okay, so then you're animating it from the position going forward, and everything will match a lot better because they're all standing in place. That means it's walking, but it's not moving anywhere. Now that I've already had it downloaded, I could potentially... this is my details for just the idle. I can go to my walk forward. That's backwards. Run. Walk. Down here, I can also say enable root motion, and he could be stuck, and then I can animate him from there. I can save this, and then I can animate it forward. The problem with these assets is there's no root bone going down to the origin, so he's pivoting off the hips. And this is one of the main reasons why games use a root bone, and why the default Unreal Mannequin has a root bone, because you can do things like lunge at somebody and then come back to 0, 0, 0, and that's why all the animations blend. We're forcing it to have a root motion, and it's root motion in the hips, so it's kind of waddling, like it's like an insect that's being pinned to the board, and it's just so it doesn't look as good. But this is just let you know the kind of the workflow. If you download it in place from Mixamo, or if it had a root bone, that would be the much better look. Let's see. Yeah, it's just not going to look good ever. Yeah, that's even worse. But it's still a good tool for blocking out stuff. So now you see, I'm still walking forward. Probably have to save. Anyway, so we'd want that to be in place. But that's just all it was from last week, was finding a character, adding some animations, and then doing a little bit of a blend between a couple of animations. That catches us up to where we're supposed to be. And I want to do a little bit about sound, since we haven't touched on it at all. And of course, sound is really going to help you with this directing of people while they're in VR. How do I know to look over here if I can't see over there? Well, there's a sound over there of a door opening, of a person talking, and then I know to look that way. This is one of the best tools creative technologists have for directing inside of VR. So let's first of all talk about where we're going to get our sound. There's a bunch of repositories. And this is school, so this is fair use. You can use whatever Justin Bieber song you want, and it's fine. You won't get sued by Justin Bieber. But in the real world, you might have to get licensing rights. So you need to look for songs and content that is considered like an open source or royalty free. And there's a lot of just Google searching you can do. One of the sites I like to use is kind of like user generated content. I just put it in the week 10. Slack channel. It's called freesounds.org. No, it's not. It's called freesound.org with no S. And this is just user-generated content. Like, you don't know what you're going to find, but it's kind of like the YouTube of sound effects. So I want my character who's drunkenly walking forward to have footsteps, right? So I'm going to do footsteps. And then I have just tons and tons of footsteps that I can utilize, I can download, and I have access to.
I want to also mention there's a website called SoundSnap, which we have access to for NYU.
If you have a link, throw it into the Slack for everyone. So you see here we have footsteps for leaves and footsteps for carpets and footsteps for all sorts of stuff, right? I've already taken this footsteps on concrete, and I'm going to load it up. I have the Creative Cloud, so I'm going to use Audition by Adobe. It's not really by Adobe. It was called Cool Edit Pro, and Adobe bought it. I used to use it when it was Cool Edit Pro, and it had way more features, and I think it was free at that point. I don't know about that. It's very simple software. It only does a few things, but it does it really well. I'm going to look at my downloads, and I'm going to find that sound. Here's it is. It's MP3. You can't really do MP3s in game engines. We're going to stick to using either WAV or AIF files. We'll do WAV because we're on PC for right now. If I double click it, here are my footsteps. So it was a little quiet when I actually first downloaded it, so I just kind of selected everything, and there's a few favorites, and these are the default favorites, and these are really great for doing, like, if you're doing voices, to add a little compression. I like to normalize everything. I do all the editing of my audio in a audio workstation first, and bring it into the game engine where everything is the same. I don't want to, if I want something to be quieter, I'll adjust that in the game engine. If I want something to be further away, I'm going to let the game engine handle that. I want everything to be the sound it would be normalized. So I normalize this audio to negative 0.1 decibels. Basically, I want it all just to be as loud as possible without clipping and distorting. So I did that kind of as a pass over everything. And then from here, I just can preview my favorite ones. Those are all awesome. Let's take like... let's go in there and just take one. I'll start at the very beginning to where the sound ends, and I'm going to save selection as. I'll make a little folder, and I'll call it step 1. Step 1. I could definitely give you documentation for this. The file formats, but we're going to do WAV, and then actually I'm going to stop. So if I import this into the game engine, this is a stereo sound, right? This is a left channel and a right channel. If I import it to a game engine, it'll be a left channel and a right channel in my ears. It's going to be what's called like headlocked. No matter where I turn, I'm always going to have a right channel in my right ear, my left channel in my left ear. And while that could be fine for music, for a sound effect, I want to live in the world and be coming from a certain source. So the one other thing I'm going to do is take this and remove the stereo capacity of it and turn it to a mono. Now, all the things I do in game engines, I convert it so it's a single sound source, so it can be localized in space. And as I turn my head, it always has a persistence. This is one of the beautiful things about VR. So there we go. It's now a mono waveform. And now I can do what I was doing before. Take it, save this little selection, and then go back through the different file formats. So I'm going to go to my downloads. We'll call it step 01. 01. And we're going to do a WAV file. And then we're not making music. We're doing sound effects. So it could be, this is sample rate. We could do either same as source, or this is what CD quality is, 44.1 kHz. Channels, it's a mono, and then bit depth is just, you can't do any more than 16, the engine can't handle it. So these are the settings to refer to. Say OK, and then it should just download to my downloads. Okay, so now I have one WAV file. I'm going to have two. All my settings are saved, so I don't have to do that again. One more time. Steps 03. And then there's the fourth. Done. We're done inside of here for right now. Maybe our character might say something, so I'm going to do a new waveform real quick. Call it voiceover. Mono 16-bit. Okay. And then I wonder if this will record. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. There we go. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Good enough for me. Get rid of my clicks. And we can like fix the fact that it's a horrible microphone by denoising it and all this kind of stuff. I'm just going to do a little vocal compression. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. That's fine. I don't care. And then we'll export this too. We'll see if we get to this. Also, the same settings. Great. And this is called voiceover. Cool. So let's go back to our engine real quick. And I'm going to import that audio. It's only going to be for this character, so I can keep it in his folder. And I'll do a new folder for audio. Import in. And then it's all in the downloads. Steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So how do I time this up with his steps right here? There's a lot of like really convoluted ways of doing it, but actually this little timeline is the best way of doing it. We could put these sounds in here. Okay? So I'm going to pause it and just kind of drag it over to, let's take off the root lock, and one step right there. Right click. Oh no, did they change it on me? This always happens. As another track, add a notify, new notify. Let's do that. We call step 1. And let's see what we do with it. Replace with notify. Say play sound. And then there's step 1. Alright, great. So it worked. We had to make a notify and then make it a play sound notify. Alright? And so now when I drag, it should make a noise. Let's double click our sound. Everything should be loud enough. Alright, so they are working. I just might not know how to use them. There you go. So now I can scrub and I can hear it. Right? And we move another one forward. Right, that's the next step. Add a notify, they call play sound. And this one could be, let's rename this to a new one. Not the most fluid demo for sure. Let's see if we could just change this one to 2. Okay, great. There we go. Change it to number 2 and then move forward. Right there. Again, notify, and there's play sound. And number 3. No, undo. 2. Excuse me. And this one is 3. Great, that's cool, but you can imagine that you, after a while, you'd hear the fact that you have these 4 sounds, right? It's these the same 4 sounds over and over again. It wouldn't be a very compelling thing. But it's good enough for the first time through. But also, we're also noticing that it's not spatialized. What we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of things to make it so that it's randomized. Each one is attenuated slightly differently, and that it's localized in space. All right, those will be the tasks we're going to do. And just like we have a node-based material editor for our textures, in the same way we have a node-based programming control with our blueprints, there is a node-based way of designing soundscapes, and it's called a audio cue. I'm going to make a new audio cue underneath sounds, audio cue, and we'll just call it audio steps. And we're just touching on audio for an hour for one day, but audio is its own job. It's incredibly important, and it really makes things compelling. So there's a big wormhole you can get into with this kind of stuff. So there's the audio blueprints. Drag them on there, and then we could test them over here. So we have only a few nodes here. There's only a few things you can do with audio, and the first one we're going to do is random. That was cool. Auto completed it. I like that. So now when we hit play, it's going to choose a random one every time. That's cool. But also, I still understand that there's 4 of them though. So there's a thing called a modulator, and this modulator details on the left side. It's every time going to change the pitch to a little higher, a little bit lower, a little bit louder, a little bit softer. We can change this to really dramatic just for a proof of concept. And then put it in here. And now we're choosing a random audio. It's going to modulate each time. Even there, you probably can't tell now that it's just 4. These can get complicated. We can use 16 of them, but this is the idea. This right here gives us a kind of a random generator of just by using 4 waveforms. I don't have to go back in here and chop up each of these. I only need a couple of them that I thought were the best. But the thing is that I just hear it in space. Let's throw in that audio that I recorded for the voiceover. So this one is it's mono like the other ones. If I throw it to the world, it's going to auto play. So when I hit play, it'll start. That's the auto activate. And then it has these attenuation settings. Attenuation is the distance for fall off. At the beginning of attenuation, it's 100% loud, and at the end of attenuation, it's 100% quiet. It's at 0% volume, and then it just has a transition. And you could choose whether that's a naturalistic fall off, which is kind of logarithmic, or whether it's like a linear fall off, so it's really, really apparent to people that are using it. They're like, oh, it's coming from this way, and they can go somewhere. That's all right here. I say, well, first of all, let's just listen to it as normal. I'm going to hit simulate. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It's just coming from the TV. But let's attenuate it. And I'm going to override it. And then I'm going to say, so here's this giant circle. This is the distance for that sound now. If I go outside the circle, I can't hear this anymore. And then when I'm in it, it's getting louder and louder till I get to this inner circle. This is the barrier for where it's 100% loud. Okay? I'm going to reduce that a little bit, and I'm going to make the inner radius like 100. So it's really small. It's only 100% loud if I'm right next to it. And then this big sphere, let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's put it like at 1,000. Alright, so if I backed out to here, we wouldn't hear it anymore. And then it should be, if this is TV set up right, when I rotate to this side, it comes out the right channel because it's like my right ear is hearing it. And I rotate to the left, it's like my left ear is hearing it. It was the best of times, it was the worst. Attenuation's working, but not the... It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's doing it. You guys can hear that? Um, it's like I'm bombarding you with like my voice, and it's just awful. I'm so sorry. So if I wanted to loop, I could put in looping, I guess, so that I could list it for a little longer. Let's do that. And then looping details is loop indefinitely. This is all changed. I'm just like, I'm riffing this. Alright, so. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Well, it didn't loop. Oh well. But we can now see that this is attenuated, but our footsteps aren't. So, I love those settings that we made for the attenuation. Those are right there. Right, these are right here. If I keep on doing this, though, if everything has the same attenuation, then if I want to apply it to a bunch of things, I have to keep on making this, keep on making it. But what I can do is actually make an attenuation asset, put it in once, and then keep on referencing it. So this is my VR attenuation, and it's just those same settings. I like it that it's 100. And that it's 1,000 as a fall off. And now I keep on using that. So going back to my voice, I'm not going to override. I'm just going to choose VR attenuation, and there it is. There's my settings in that one, and I can select it for all these other ones. And then if I go into my cues, I can also add an attenuation node and load it there. So now each sound of the footsteps will only come from where the foot hits the ground. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So this is the left speaker. So this is how you do footsteps. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. On the right speaker. So this is way more apparent when you're inside of a headset, but that's the kind of secret. And there's a lot of fun stuff to do with these little notifies. You can also let's see. Let's skip forward to this one again. This one's a step. We can do right here. We can add in a new one. Add a notify, play particle effect. So this particle effect, then we could choose one that we already have. I only have really crazy ones. And then we can tell it what bone it's coming from. It's coming from the left foot, and then when I scrub through, well, it should start spawning those. It's really good if you're adding in like dust or sparks or something like that. I think this particle system is the wrong kind of particle system. If I load in the default starter content, it has the right one for us to use. But anyway, that was just a little aside. So attenuation cues, random attenuation variants. So yeah, the other thing we could do is this character's right here, and this is getting into how you can parent things to skeletal meshes we were talking about earlier. This voiceover's down here, and the character's up here, Bobby Newport. This could be within a blueprint, but if I'm just doing one little parent, I take this voiceover, take it over to Bobby Newport, and when I drag it on top, it says which bone does it want to be on. Well, I want that to come from the head. So this voiceover is now attached to the head. I can zero it out. It's on the head. And if I was in the sequencer, I could see that because it's parented, of course, it's walking through it. So now his voice is going with them, and he's talking to you from there. We're using a circle as our attenuation, but you can also use different shapes like cones, so he's only talking in front of him. and other kind of different shapes for fall off of attenuation. And again, now if I was to start off right here, the sound would get quieter.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Anyway, we can move the timeline other places as well. If you want to do soundtracks, then that's great for sequencer. Just throw your sound in sequencer and you can scrub it and you can see that it's in there. And soundtracks usually are headlocked, right? They don't live in space except for when using like a radio. And then a radio can be done inside of it could be have a localized sound there. I think that if you want to do like an old-timey radio, you can add a little telephone voice and it'll sound like it's an old, cheap radio from a long time ago. So there's fun stuff to do with that. There's other things called low-pass filters. If something's supposed to be behind a wall, you can make things so it sounds muffled, like it's behind a wall. But you can do all that inside the game engine. There's a lot of there's a Oculus plugin that has a lot of features for what's called like sound occlusion. So but it's like a thing. It's a whole other system. For sounds, if you're really, really interested in doing sound for video games, most people don't use the built-in sound system or sound component for game engines. They usually use a thing called Wwise. And a thing called Fmod. And this is what professional game engines, sound designers use. They just ignore the sound implementation from the game engines altogether, and these work for Unity and Unreal. So if you're interested in playing around with them, I think they're free to use. If you make money with your game, you have to give them royalties, but they're free to play around with. So I'm going to add this stuff to week 10 for you, and we'll call it a day here. I know we did a whole thing of volumetric video. We'll get to video later on. I don't want to go over on when it's already dark out. So that's it for today.